Good morning. We will call to order the March 12, 2019 meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisors Cerna?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum. This meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T UVerse cable systems. This meeting is closed captioned and is webcast at sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated Friday, March 15th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. A DVD copy is available for checkout from any local library branch. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may fill out a speaker slip and hand it to staff. When the chair calls your name, please come to the podium. Also, please silence your electronic devices at this time.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members, I'd like to announce that Supervisor Don Natoli is representing the Delta Counties Coalition at the Senate Natural Resources Committee hearing at the state capitol in support of SB 204. This is regarding the oversight of California water fix contracts and the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority. He will be here later this morning, hopefully around the 10:45 hour.
Thank you.
For your matters today,
Mr. Cerna.
In terms of schedule, I know the CEO, Supervisor Tully, and myself spoke with him about what was originally a 9:30 item. That's going to be moved?
Yeah, she's getting ready to announce
Okay,
it.
all right. Want to make sure.
yes. Okay, for your consent matters, items 1 through 29. Item 17, you're adopting an ordinance amending section 16.155.170 of the Sacramento County Code relating to credit or reimbursement for turnkey park and recreation facilities. You waived reading on this on February 26th. Item 21, you're introducing an ordinance amending Sacramento County Code to add section 2.09.800 related to the South Sacramento Conservation Agency. You're waiving reading on this and continuing to March 19th for adoption. That concludes my notes.
Are there any issues, questions? Anybody want anything pulled from the consent calendar? No member. Oh, yes.
Let the record reflect out abundance of caution. I'm going to recuse on items 21, 22, 23. Those are the HCP.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Frost, and the chair will second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote with those members present, and let the record reflect that Supervisor Peters recused from items 21, 22, and 23. We will be taking things out of order for your first item. Item number 30 will be at the end of the morning session. So your first item is item 31, review of the 2019 annual plan for the Housing Authority of the County of Sacramento.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cerna.
So I see the gas in the audience about moving it to the end of the morning calendar. The reason for that is because it was not noted by the clerk, is that I know Supervisor Don Natoli wanted to participate in the conversation, and he is currently at the state capitol, so we're extending a courtesy to him so that he can be here for that conversation.
Good morning, Chairperson Kennedy and members of the board. My name is Sarah O'Daniel, and I'm here to present to you the update to the 2019 annual plan for the Housing Choice Voucher and public housing programs. I want to start by providing some context and share information about our programs before getting into the annual plan. The Housing Choice Voucher Program houses over 12,600 families on an annual basis. In a nutshell, how the program works is that the family pays 30% of their income towards housing, and the rest is paid by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and the family finds a unit anywhere in Sacramento County. Subprograms administered under the voucher program include the Veterans Assistance Supportive Housing Program, or VASH for short, and this is where the rental subsidy assists housing homeless veterans. We also have a subprogram of project-based vouchers where affordable housing units are created and the subsidy is tied to the unit. We also administer vouchers to non-elderly disabled families, as well as non-elderly disabled homeless families. In public housing, properties are owned by the government and managed by the Housing Authority, where eligible low-income families receive decent and safe housing. Under the public housing portfolio, we house over 2,700 families, of which over 1,000 reside in the county. In terms of the funding that's received by the Housing Authority, all funds received for the voucher and public housing programs are non-discretionary funds and come from HUD. On the voucher side, we receive approximately $100 million to pay our landlords, and these are funds that are pumped into the local economy, and approximately $7.5 million to pay for administrative costs. On the public housing side, we receive $4.4 million for operating and administrative costs combined, and $1.5 million to conduct capital improvements to our units located in the county. There is a significant gap between the capital funds available in comparison to the funds received to meet the capital needs of our properties. I'm sure you've heard it in the news as well, that there is a nationwide gap of about $30 billion, with a B, billion dollars in capital improvement needs that cannot be met with existing federal funding. Locally, we need at least $23 million per year in the county to make the necessary improvements. However, we only receive $1.5 million annually to make these improvements. Between both our programs, collectively, we house over 45,000 residents on a daily basis. The average family size is 3, and the average household income is $13,800. Here are some statistics in terms of our voucher program and public housing. Over 40% of our families have a female head of household in HCV versus 46% in public housing. 68% of our families have a disabled family member in the voucher program versus 42% in public housing. 57% of our families are families with children in the voucher program versus 50% in public housing. And then for the elderly, we have 30% have an elderly household member versus 27% in public housing. There is no doubt that but for these vital housing resources, many of our families would be homeless.
Okay, let me interrupt for just a second. Supervisor Serna.
Thank you. Can you go back to the other previous slide, please? I just want to understand the percentages there on the right-hand side. Are those, is that a breakdown outside of the allocation that has been assigned to serve previously homeless individuals?
This includes all the families that include the homeless and all the families on our current program.
So this is the entire universe of,
Yes.
of the vouchers. Okay, thank you.
And the public housing.
Thank you.
So going into what is the annual plan? In order for HUD to ensure that housing authority policies align with HUD regulations, housing authorities are required to have housing authority plans. Having a housing authority plan was originally established in the United States Housing Act of 1937 and was updated in 1998 with the Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act, or QARA. We have a lot of acronyms in our world here. And it requires the housing authority to submit a 5-year plan every 5 years to HUD. And currently, we are in the 2015 to the 2019 cycle, 5-year cycle. In addition to that, each year, the housing authority must submit an annual plan, which is an update to the 5-year plan. And we are currently in the last year of that plan, which is the 2019 annual plan. We will be updating the 5-year plan in the fall of this year to come up with the 2020 to the 2024 period. So breaking down the 2019 annual plan, which as mentioned is an update to the 5-year plan, it is composed of the annual plan and 2 other documents. In public housing, the administrative document that outlines all policies and procedures related to the HUD regulations is called the Admissions and Continued Occupancy Policy, or the ACOP. On the voucher side, the document is called the HCV Administrative Plan, or the Admin Plan for short. Thank you so much. While the third document listed on the slide is not part of the annual plan process, the Housing Authority simultaneously updates the 5-year capital fund document at this time, which is a 5-year rolling document of capital improvements for public housing that are planned with the anticipated federal funds. So what does the 5-year plan and the annual plan entail? The 5-year plan, which is called the agency plan, is a strategic planning document for the public housing and voucher programs that identifies the Housing Authority's goals for the next 5 years. The annual plan, in turn, describes the Housing Authority's administration of both programs and how we are meeting those 5-year plan goals. As mentioned in my previous slide, with the annual plan, we also attach the public housing ACOP and the admin plan, where each year we outline any new initiatives or updates that have been undertaken to conform with HUD guidelines. And I will share some of those initiatives shortly. Don't have sticky fingers here. At a glance, both the public housing ACOP and the admin plan, they document how families are pulled off the waiting list, how program eligibility is determined. It outlines the grievance process, requirements for continued eligibility, the termination process, and the due rights of families. The variation between the 2 documents is that as we are the landlord in public housing, the ACOP also details information related to adhering to the lease and protocol related to repairs and maintenance. On the voucher side, the plan details more information related to the administration of programs, such as the VASH program. In terms of what some of the updates are that were made in the 2019 plan, for public housing, some of the changes relate to processing individuals with criminal records. In the past, when we were processing families for public housing, we used to look at a 5-year criminal history, arrests, and convictions. Based on HUD guidelines, we now only look at criminal convictions and have reduced our look-back period from 5 to 3 years. This is also the same policy for our voucher program. In addition, some of the other highlights include revisions being made to our marijuana policy, as well as updating policy related to the storing of flammable items indoors and gardening protocol. On the voucher side, a lot of the changes are related to updating existing policies to mirror HUD regulations. In addition to serving the homeless, the elderly, and the disabled, due to our current tight rental market, we are also adding a preference to assist families who are on the wait list who are severely rent burdened, which means that they're paying over 50% of their income towards rent and they are housed. This way, if we are able to give them a preference, they don't have to take a voucher and go out on the street and look for housing for 6 to 9 months and maybe not even find housing. They are able to lease in place with the benefit of the rental assistance, thereby reducing their rent burden. And this is a way to help those families who are paying over 50% of their income towards rent if the landlord is willing to accept that voucher. Annually, we update the annual plan and release the draft documents for public comment around the July timeframe. We open the comment period for 45 days and proactively contact the Resident Advisory Board, or the RAB, that is the advisory board for all of our public housing properties. And we also work closely with Legal Services of Northern California for input. We also seriously review each and every comment that we receive from the public. We go forward in a 2-step process to our commission. in September. During this time frame, we do a public hearing to hear public comments and a second meeting with responses to the public comments. Only then does the commission vote on the plan for all documents to be sent to HUD. We submit all the draft documents to HUD by mid-October, as they have 75 days to review our documents and hopefully approve them by January of the next year. I do want to acknowledge that we do have two of our commission members here. We have Mel Griffin in the audience, and we also have the chair of our advisory of our commission, Gail Morgan. He is also the chair of our resident advisory board as well. You're not? The treasurer, but he's chair of our commission and treasurer of the RAB. I also wanted to give an update on the homeless initiative that we had undertaken a couple years ago. We came before you, and based on your guidance, we put together an initiative to house 1,755 homeless families. After that, we went through our administrative process, which is exactly what we're talking about today. We went to HUD to update our documents, and year one was last year of our efforts. I'd like to put a slide here with our update. So based on our initiative, we were doing a combination of different initiatives. One was to project-base and have project-based vouchers available. And then the limited allocation is where we were taking referrals for our families through our flexible supports rehousing program, as well as the city's program. And we were also serving homeless youth through the P3 program. And here are the numbers based as of last week. We have been able to, for total, be able to help 713 families. Out of that, 19 are through the flexible supports rehousing and the city program. We were able to house 10 through the flexible FSRP, and 9 through the whole person care, and 31 through the P3 program, for a total of 50. And then we were able to house 376 families through project-based vouchers, for a total of 426. In addition, there are 287 units in the pipeline to be constructed shortly, for a total of 713. I would also like to point out that the challenge is finding units here in Sacramento County, and we can see, based on the column on the right, that there are 217 families right now that are looking for units here at this time.
I have a question, then I'm going to go to the board. The 287 new construction, does that include Twin Rivers?
That does not include
Okay.
Twin
All right,
Rivers.
so we're not double counting. Okay.
No.
Supervisor Cerna.
I had a similar question about the 287. So if it's not Twin Rivers, what is it?
Some of the projects that are part of the new construction, and again, we allocated project-based vouchers in 2017 and in 2018. There are for Mather Veterans Village, for Courtyard Inn, to name a few, and the projects that are being brought forward, Sunrise Point and Mutual Housing on the Boulevard. So those are the projects that we have.
Do you have, I assume you have individual schedules for when these vouchers are applied for that new construction?
Schedules of when they'll be, actually, when families will move in? Is
Yeah,
that the
when you
question?
expect that they're going to be used.
Yes, we do.
Is that part of the presentation and upcoming slides?
I do not have that information, but
We will
Christine?
work with
Okay,
SHRA and get you that information.
I think all 5 of us would probably appreciate knowing
Okay.
the timing of the use of those vouchers as it relates to new construction.
and we will provide that
Great,
to you.
thank you.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. I'm trying to maybe it's a similar question, put this slide together with about vouchers with your slide 4 or 5 ago. Are they separate from the vouchers you talked about a few minutes ago? Are these, how do we get a combined picture of how many vouchers are there and what they're being used for and how many are available?
Yeah, so we have, these numbers are part of the overall universe of numbers that I presented. I was just
Okay.
sharing.
So these are included in the
These are
slide
included.
a few minutes
Yes.
ago?
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
And, well, I have a couple other questions. I'll wait till you're finished.
Okay, thank you. Could I go back to the presentation? So I just actually, this is my conclusion. I just wanted to end by sharing with you that our housing authority staff in public housing and the voucher program work really hard to house the 45,000 individuals each day. We do our best to listen to the needs of our families and provide the best service possible. I am proud to note that, HUD also reviews our program on an annual basis. They review the program nationwide of all the housing authority programs. And based on 15 different indicators, our voucher program received the national recognition of being a high-performing agency. And in addition, this year we were honored to receive the distinction of receiving the VASH Program of the Year award for the Western region of the United States. And this is related to having a really good relationship with the VA and for our success in leasing up homeless veterans in Sacramento County. So I also wanted to introduce my counterpart, Latan Jones, who oversees public housing, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. So one other question about the 713 number that you had on the previous slide. I just, again, want to make sure I understand the use of the vouchers here. This 713 is 713 out of the 1755?
That is correct, and that is year one.
So
So we have 2 more years.
Okay,
This was a
so-
3-year initiative.
So our burn rate on those is, we've used 40% roughly of the vouchers assigned for people previously suffering homelessness. We have 60% left of the vouchers that are, then have subcategories to them to use in the next 2 years?
That is correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Supervisor Frost.
I have a question relating to seniors. On the senior vouchers, I've heard from some of the seniors in my district that they feel badly because they make just a little bit too much for what they feel they wish they could qualify for. And so my first question is, does HUD periodically review those income parameter or qualifying requirements? How often do they, and have they recently? There are a lot of seniors that call themselves the forgotten seniors because they make just a little bit too much to qualify for the programs, but they're still struggling. So that was my first question.
So HUD updates the income limits on an annual basis. So they do update them, and then we do put them on our website. And when they're applying for when they're filling out the application, the income limits are there, and they do update them.
Okay, and what is the waiting list right now? It was I think it was 2 years, 2 to 4 years before last year.
Yeah, we have, in combination of all, we have about 12 different waiting lists, and in aggregate, we have about 50,000 families that are on our waiting list combined between all of our programs. That's public housing as well as the voucher.
So is it still a couple years waiting list?
It is.
And are they taken as they come, or are they taken as you find a suitable situation? Is it not always first come, first serve? How does that work?
For the voucher side, we have preferences, and also for the public housing side. So for example, if you're homeless, if you're disabled, for some of our properties, if you are elderly, there are preferences, so they go to the top of the wait list. So we do actually have wait lists that are for our elderly as well.
Okay, and we have, I think, a couple thousand in, I think there are a couple thousand students that are homeless in our San Juan Unified School District. So this doesn't represent a very large number of students, and I'm wondering if the vouchers, and I know a lot of those students are couch surfing or staying with friends, can they qualify for vouchers that could help pay for their couch with their friend? I mean, are they sent to a separate housing situation? How do you work those vouchers?
Well, so one, we do have the P3 program, and the P3 program is for if they're a student and they're between 18 and 24, that's a program for them, and if they're homeless. But they can also apply on any of our wait lists as well, if they meet the income requirements. So in fact, I've received a lot of emails from students, and I encourage them to apply to all of our waiting lists.
So it's only as they apply, you're not proactively going out trying to connect with the high schools, because they have a list of students, I guess, that they feed every day, or is it just as they come to you, how that works?
Yeah, we put the information on our website, but we can certainly go out and proactively, and we have met with certain individuals related to the school districts, but we can certainly do more and go proactively to let them, get them to sign up onto the wait list. If they are part of the P3 program, it is a referral program, so we can connect them with a service provider if they're within that age group and they meet the income limits and they are a student, and then they can come on to our program.
But there's vouchers available for those that are in high school that are younger also, right? Is there, or no?
You cannot be under 18 years of age.
So there's
So it's
different
18 and above.
resources for those kids, I'm assuming?
It's through the families. Thank you, Lachelle. It's through the families. So if they're part of a household, then they would be eligible. But we are the HUD program is for individuals that are 18 and over.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. A couple more questions. I have read that the governor is going to make tax credit plans part of his budget. Do you know anything about that, and are you following it in the budget process?
I will turn it over to Lachelle.
Yes, in fact, the governor has come forward with a very aggressive plan in terms of housing, and he does want to increase the number of tax credits that are available, which is, obviously what we use to help finance our developments where we're working with a developer. And just as a follow-up, one of the things Supervisor Frost, for seniors who probably make a little bit too much to qualify for the Section 8, a tax credit unit would probably be something that's much more suitable.
Yeah.
But
So do you
yes,
have any
we are tracking that.
Do you have any indication as to, is that going to be split into different categories like you were describing in the report? The tax credits, or is it just going to be 9% or tax credits for anyone?
Yeah, so we don't know the breakdown between the 9% and 4% program,
Right,
if that's what
okay.
you're referring to.
Yeah.
And the 9%, as you know, is the competitive one, which obviously gives us more resources to do projects. The 4% is your more standard, non-competitive, over-the-counter. We would benefit in Sacramento from an increase in either one of those, but especially the 9% program.
Well, I'm wondering how we can be prepared to zoom in as soon as those 9% become available and try and get them in Sacramento County. And I'm going back to my old mantra on the old motels, which you and I talked about a couple weeks ago, about will we have it in our 1 and 5 year plans that we have a preference for these kinds of old motel conversions and encouraging developers to look at those properties and be ready for the 9% tax credit?
Right. So,
Bonanza.
as you know, we are having a workshop on the 22nd of this month at SHRA for those who are interested in motel conversions. And we're looking for developers, we're looking for operators of motels, anyone who has any interest in that. We are going to have a workshop and walk you through the process. In terms of being ready with projects, that's a part of it, is to start to queue those up. But the way that we would be most successful, and we are coming back before the board to talk about all of the funding sources that are coming out of the state. So we'll have a good in-depth discussion about that. I can't remember, but it's on the calendar. Yeah, I think in April.
You mentioned that when you were in, but since you're looking at a plan, is that program going to be part of your plan?
This plan is not the same. The plan that Sarah is talking about is only about our public housing as well as our housing choice voucher. But when I come back in April, that's where we'll walk through all of those funding sources, because that's the resources that are financed through Christine's development shop.
Okay, so on the vouchers, how far in advance of a project being completed would you have to reserve or hold aside or whatever the terminology might be
Right.
for those projects?
So the beauty of SHRA and the fact that we're a one-stop shop is that we coordinate the release of the RFP for those vouchers at the time that the tax credit rounds are coming up. So that way developers have some level of certainty that they have the vouchers, which then makes them more competitive when they go for the tax credits. So we align those so that they can be the most competitive. For instance, would you like me to give you an example?
Yes.
Okay, so for instance, if the tax credit round is, let's say, in September, what we'll do is then back up from that particular time in terms of the issuance of the RFP so that they could have those vouchers in hand by the time September comes around and they're applying to the state.
Okay, so it works into the timing of your annual plan for the vouchers that, I mean, would there be can we prepare for a situation where you get a good project coming in and you might not, you don't want to be in a situation of not having enough vouchers?
Right. So what we do in our annual plan is that we allow kind of a general statement that allows us to issue at any time during the year. So that way we're not tied up by the plan in terms of the issuance. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Is that your presentation?
That's my presentation.
Okay, I have no cards from the audience.
It's
So
information.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gill, so I've got here resolution number HA 1497, which was a resolution that was passed in 1981, and to my knowledge hasn't been revisited as far as the makeup of the SHRA commission. I think that since 1981, that local government and government in general has gone through a tremendous amount of efforts to increase transparency and accountability. I'm not sure that this document, as adopted in 1981, is the most transparent or accountable way of doing business. So what I'm going to ask of the CEO is to come back to the board with a discussion on what options or alternatives might be available. And one of the alternatives is status quo, no question. But I think it's healthy for any organization to take a look at documents such as this from time to time and make sure that we're doing the best business for our constituents. And would like you to bring forward some alternatives and options to this resolution.
Will do.
Thank you. All right. Next item.
Item 32 is the authorized implementation and collection of a $10 per transaction customer facility charge from airport rental car companies for purposes of designing, financing, and constructing a potential consolidated rental car facility at Sacramento International Airport.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sylvia Ambrosio. I'm the Deputy Director of Finance and Administration for the Department of Airports. And today, as was mentioned, we are here to seek approval from the board to implement a new $10 CFC per transaction customer facility charge. What we would be doing with the money is the planning and design of a new consolidated rental car facility. Provided in your packet is attachment 1. It reflects the location of the rental car facility, which is currently located on 34 acres. It's approximately 1 mile from the passenger terminals, and it's close to the I-5 corridor, so there's a lot of traffic from the rental car facility on and off the roadway right there. The facilities were constructed in the early 1990s and originally provided enough counter space for 5 rental car company brands. In 2001, the facilities were redesigned to provide for additional space for Enterprise and Dollar. In 1994, when the facilities were first opened, the airport accommodated approximately 2.7 million deplane passengers per year. We've now grown to 6.5 million. As a result, the need for shuttle services as well as parking spaces available for available rental cars have grown tremendously. As shown here, the rental car companies are forced now to lease an additional 1,500 parking spaces and other parking lots which are actually located away from the rental car complex. Today, there are 4 rental car companies that offer 9 different brands at the airport. The facilities have reached the end of their useful life for a number of reasons. As discussed in the earlier slide, there's not enough parking spaces for the rental car vehicles. Because of the location, the rental cars and busing contributes to the roadway congestion. The increased busing has added costs that are now charged to the rental cars for the busing, close to $4 million a year. And the existing facilities are inefficient and they do not provide for the desired level of customer service. Today, the department would like to plan and design a new facility that better meets the needs of the rental car facilities and for the airport. The desire is to implement the new $10 customer facility charge that would be collected by the rental car companies at the time that the customers rent the cars. The fee would be used to finance the planning and design efforts, and surplus collections would then be banked and offset funding used to construct the new rental car facility. Before any construction occurs, the department will return back to the board to seek approval before we start anything. So as mentioned in the previous slides, the department would like to implement the customer facility charge, which is commonly called a CFC. The fee is regulated at the state level and would be tracked separately from operating revenues. As shown in this slide, the state restricts the use of the fee to the construction of a consolidated rental car facility, or CONRAC, or any other type of rental car facilities, and also provides the means to transport passengers back and forth to the terminals to those facilities. State legislation allows the fees, which can be imposed in one of 2 ways. Either on the $10 per contract basis, or on what's called an alternative per transaction day basis, which after satisfying various state requirements, you can then charge that fee. Charging on this basis would require a full scope of work, as well as close to 30% design before we could ever start to have conversations with the state. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So for your reference, we've provided this table. It's also included in your board letter. And here you can see the CFC rate that's being charged at other airports in California and the purpose for implementing that fee. CFC analysis. This slide summarizes the required analysis that would be needed to impose the $10 CFC. The first bullet, including gathering rental car transaction data, was completed in November of 2018 and resulted in the estimated $12.3 million in collections through December of 2020. The following two bullets will be completed once we start collecting the $10 CFC. At this time, I would also like to note that all of the on-airport rental car companies unanimously support this fee, and copies of the letters that they have submitted in that support is attached in your packet. Here's the anticipated timeline to implement the $10 CFC. If approved by the board today, the rental car companies can begin charging the CFC as early as May 1st. Rental car companies would remit those collections to the county on a monthly basis. And as mentioned, the collections would be tracked separately from operating revenues. So what are the next steps? If approved by the board, the department would then use the $10 CFC to identify the site and the design of the new CONRAC. Based on that full scope of whatever is come up with, we would identify what the appropriate alternative per transaction day CFC would be. Then we would come back to the board with the results of our analysis and request permission to move forward with the construction. And with that completes my presentation. Any
Supervisor
questions?
Cerna.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm not sure if you're best equipped to answer this question or if our airport director, who I see is in the audience, is willing to try, but I know that there's a great many things in flux at the airport as it relates to ground transportation in general, especially the advent of TNCs and passengers' preference to use TNCs over taxis, and we're currently trying to grapple with how best to stage them at our Terminal B. And I suspect there's probably other nuanced dynamics to that in play at the airport. So my question is, what do we know? Have we done any research? Are there examples of how TNCs and their business plans and how they function relative to airport operations will likely affect consumer behavior relative to rental cars in the future, and has that been considered in the context of what you're asking us to do today, which is to essentially set up the infrastructure to collect revenue for a new rental car facility? So in other words, do we feel secure that the investment in a new rental car facility is sound, given the fact that there are a great many things that are beyond our control when it comes to consumer behavior, passenger behavior, as it relates to ground transportation?
Certainly, I can invite Cindy Nickel up here, but I will state that in our discussions with the rental car companies, they feel very confident. And as a matter of fact, they have come to us several years ago and have been asking for this fee in order to assist them in the cost of the busing, as well as to provide them more space. They are just crammed in that little area that they've got. Part of the analysis that we've already done was working with those rental car companies to get the transactions and what their thoughts for the future would be as far as rental cars, and they feel very confident that the facility was needed.
That's a great question, Supervisor. Thank you for that. So I would say there are two aspects to this. One is land use. So we are looking at what we need to put where. We've talked about parking, the TNCs, this rental car facility. So we are actually right now updating our forecasts of activity, which help drive understanding of the future demand for rental car and other facilities. We're also going to be doing a comprehensive analysis of what we need to put where. So we'll be coming back to you on that. Secondly, I would say in terms of the effect of the TNCs, it's different at different airports. And what we've seen here is we've had a little bit of a dip in our revenues from parking. We have seen huge increase in our TNC revenue. We've seen rental car revenues have actually continued to increase. I think that's really driven by the increase in passengers. Last year, we had an increase of 10.4% in passengers. So I think we might have seen more in the rental cars without the TNCs. It's probably had a dampening effect. So what you've asked is exactly what I would like my staff to do, which is analyze in greater precision exactly what we think the effect of these different ground transportation modes has been.
Great, thank you. One other question. I know that part of what is being planned for is to include charging stations for
Yes.
the rental of battery electric vehicles, zero emission vehicles. How will the new facility accommodate growth of that particular infrastructure as market share continues to expand in the zero emission vehicle space?
That's a great question. So what I would like to see is any structures that we can put in place, whether it's structured parking or rental car facilities, I'd like to see them be very flexible, because the rapid pace of evolution in green energy as well as technology really is it's unprecedented. So what I will want to see is flexibility in the design of those facilities. But certainly we'll be looking for green facilities.
Thank you.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. What is the term of this fee? How long will it be in place?
Well, that's a good question. It would be however long it takes to actually come forward with the design study, and including the ground transportation and everything, enough information to come back to you in order to move forward with the per transaction, or the alternative CFC, which is on a per transaction day. The goal would be is to move forward with actual issuance of bonds to do the construction, and we would need to make sure that we have the support through the CFC to back those bonds. Right now,
What's the
probably
short
about
answer to my
we're
question?
estimating about 2 years before we come back to the board.
Okay. So how much money will that raise?
It was 12.3 million is what the original analysis came up with.
Okay, and it's just going to, sorry, you had a very long explanation there. It's going to pay for the planning, is that what you're saying?
For the planning and design.
Okay.
There's also environmental and other things.
Okay. So it's not going to pay for the project?
No.
It's just to do the preliminary work?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I have a question. The former airport director brought to us, I don't know, a year and a half ago, some pretty grand plans as far as redesigning the whole transportation network around the airport. Is that still on the table? Is that part of this? Instead of piecemealing, I'd like to see a master plan.
Thank you, Supervisor, for your question. We are absolutely doing that. One of the key factors in that, which John might have been assuming, was what happens with the FAA tower. If we were able to get the FAA tower moved to the north side of the airport, that would free up a lot of the space that we could use for transportation. It's still very unclear that we would ever get money to move the tower. So we are looking at that. That's just kind of the first question.
Okay.
We've heard from at least 3 airport directors that tower needs to be moved. When are we going to do it?
Right.
When we get the 6th airport director.
Okay.
It's really, ultimately, it's dependent on FAA funding.
She just unpacked her bags.
Yes. Exactly. So,
well, what are we lacking in our application? What do we?
Funding, right?
The funding
money?
levels just aren't there at the federal level, and
nationwide they're not?
Yes, that's correct.
So
Nationwide, they're not. So it's towers are built for FAA staff with money appropriated by Congress. There are very few exceptions.
That's all you had to say right there.
Yeah. So
On that question, because I was involved long before I was on the Board of Supervisors with going back to Washington and trying to get money for this tower. And then we were told people aren't building new towers. I mean, it's so.
San Francisco just did.
Okay.
So it's a very nice tower.
We need to get a
and it was funded
senator
with
from
FAA.
Sacramento, evidently, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we continue to hope, but it's really tough. Especially the news today I saw is that we may see further cuts in funding for FAA. Today we heard that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Is there a motion?
Do we have public speakers?
We do not.
In that case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the resolution.
And second, please vote.
Unanimous vote with those members present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 33, you are introducing an ordinance amending Chapter 6.88 and repealing Chapter 6.87, Title 6 of the Sacramento County Code relating to cannabis. You're waiving full reading and continuing to March 19th for adoption. You're also adopting a resolution of intention to initiate an amendment of the Sacramento County Zoning Code relating to cannabis. The project has an exempt status.
I've learned to raise the podium.
Yeah, you're one of the few that knows how to do that.
All right. Hear me okay?
A little more.
A little more?
Yeah.
All right. We're good? All right. Good morning. Jared Wycliffe for Code Enforcement. Before I start, I'd like to introduce other county partners we have here that are able to speak and answer any questions you may have following the conclusion of my presentation. Barry Chamberlain, also here from Code Enforcement. Sheriff's Department, big help in drafting this ordinance, and Captain Jim Barnes is here to speak on their behalf. Planning Department, we have Leanne Moffitt and Mark McElhaney. With the DA's office, Natalia Luna is here to answer any questions you may have for their office, and County Council is represented by Susie Masarle. So today, the ordinance we're discussing is making changes to Sac County Code 101 and 688, repealing 687, and also initiating a zoning code amendment, which I'll speak to at the very end. As you're aware, the Prop 64 that was passed in November 2016 created a lot of changes we had to implement. We came to this board in 2017 implementing some of those immediate changes that needed to happen the day after that vote was recorded. We knew that day that we were bringing you an incomplete package because the state still had to reconcile the recreation and the medical marijuana schemes into one. And so the state has reconciled those two systems in one, and today's ordinance changes to then bring us in line with that. Before I continue on, I also want to point out there was a typo in the financial analysis. As you had read it, the first line and the staff report should have read, "This action will not result in any increased costs." Okay. So why are we bringing these changes forward? We've been doing marijuana enforcement now for 5-6 years. And the policies we have in place right now are just essentially ineffective. For several years, we did administrative penalties. It's $100 per visit, regardless of the number of plants. There's no financial incentive to comply with the county's ordinances. Last year, we tried something a little different. We shifted gears towards being more heavy on the Sheriff's Department side with doing warrants and seizing plants. Still, the number of grows are just exponentially larger than what we have the staff resources to visit. So we're seeking to increase our enforcement efforts to help minimize the number of grows in Sacramento County. Reason being the public safety concern with the burglaries, the home invasion issues, violent crimes in and around these grow sites, the safety to the occupants inside the home with improper electrical wiring that's just out of control. The environmental concerns with where the wastes and solvents related to grow are disposed of. And then also, it's a hot topic right now in the news with the housing stock. People not having affordable housing to live in. When we have thousands of homes in Sacramento County growing marijuana instead of housing people, that's a real problem, and we want to curtail the illegal grows and make those houses available to families. So
I'm sorry, did you say there are thousands of homes in Sacramento County that are growing marijuana?
Yes,
Thousands.
thousands.
Okay, thank you.
And we can visit 30 a week.
Pardon?
And we can visit 30 a week with the staffing resources we have.
But we permit that, some of that, right?
We permit,
We permit some of that. There are some that are abiding by the ordinance that we passed.
Oh, I'm
With the
speaking of-
nine plant maximum. They're not necessarily 1,000 houses with 1,000 plants each, right?
the thousands I'm speaking of are the ones that are beyond the 9 allotted.
Okay.
Not-
That's an
not-
important distinction.
Not the legal ones. Yeah, the legal ones, we don't have any.
Maybe we could
clues
take
to what
the
number it is.
houses and put the homeless in there.
So,
Solve the problem.
Yep.
yep. So the changes we're making to the code today, we're increasing misdemeanor penalties from $500 to $1,000 countywide as pursuant to state law. We're changing the word marijuana to cannabis. State law no longer calls it marijuana anymore, so we're matching. We're cleaning up state law references that no longer exist or are outdated as a result of the state's reconciliation of the two systems. We're repealing the public consumption of marijuana because that's now controlled by the state. There's no reason to have a duplicative or an even possibly conflicting local statute. We're cleaning up local definitions regarding medical marijuana since it no longer exists. So there's no more caretaker, collective, caregiver. We're taking those out of the code, and we're just going straight marijuana. Marijuana's marijuana. We're changing the cultivation restrictions to allow cultivation in a single room or detached structure. Previously, it was allowed in both simultaneously or multiple rooms. So it became a problem where you have some plants growing in more than one room. We are changing the allowable plant count from 9 to 6 to conform to the state law. We did keep it in the initial draft at 9 because there was still a medical marijuana scheme in the state of California, and we kept that 9. But with Prop 64 saying 6 is the plant count, and now the state conforming the two together, we're now bringing ours in line.
Supervisor
with state
Cerna.
requirements.
Thank you. So on that point, because I want to understand this, what besides the overall effort to make consistent our code with post Prop 64 passage in state law, what is there a practical problem to be solved because of the 3 plant difference?
Yeah, Susie, are you able to explain our legal reasoning between? We have one. I just don't have it memorized.
Good morning. I'm not as tall as Jared, but I think you can.
We can hear you.
You're good.
Those microphones bend, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the primary problems with having the number at 9 instead of 6 is because state law has changed. It's a misdemeanor to have over 6 plants in your possession. So we're essentially condoning a misdemeanor by our constituents by having the plant number be more than 6. And also, Sheriff Barnes could speak to this in terms of enforcement. Among the neighboring jurisdictions, in order to be consistent for law enforcement, it is important to have consistency among jurisdictions with the number of plants.
Are there other local jurisdictions, whether they be cities or counties, that have had permitted more than 6 plants that have brought it in consistency with state law?
All other local jurisdictions are back to 6, unless they have a legalization, a regulation scheme that they have. Like some local jurisdictions, they allow commercial cultivation,
Okay.
and then they're able to grow more than whatever that 6 is, pursuant to whatever that permit is. But for the personal cultivation,
Sure.
we were the last ones of any jurisdiction I could pull in the state that was not 6.
So use City of Sacramento as an example. Do they keep it at 6, or do they have something more than 6, or nothing at all?
It says 6 in here.
They're 6.
Okay, but were they more before and they brought it down to 6 because of passage of Prop 64?
I don't recall what their count was before, but there were many jurisdictions that were much higher than 6 before. We were 9, and other counties were 99 per acre or whatever the case may be. But with the Proposition 64 passing, everybody immediately fell in line with 6 as the rule. And some jurisdictions were 0 prior to that, and then they moved up to 6. So
Okay, thank you.
Additionally, this ordinance will require property owner permission to cultivate cannabis inside the home. requires written notarized permission from the owner before he grows, before he or she cultivates marijuana in the home. It must be renewed every 12 months, and if the property changes hands within 30 days, the renter has to get a new notarized permission from the new owner to continue cultivating marijuana. Administrative penalties are established of $1,000 per day per plant, in excess of the 6, and also for any housing or building code violations that exist in furtherance of the illegal cultivation. Both are immediately imposed upon identifying the violation to the property owner. The property owner is afforded relief from that if 3 things can be proven. One is the property is in possession of a tenant, the property owner has a rental agreement that explicitly prohibits cultivation of marijuana in his residence, and third, if the owner had prior notice that the cultivation was going on property before we issued an administrative penalty. Changes not being made to the code, the things that the board were adamant about in the past that we're still not taking away, still locked and inaccessible to minors, still not visible by the public, still outdoor, completely prohibited. Cultivation areas still got to comply with all the housing, building, fire codes, and the primary use of the home must remain a residence. And then finally, the zoning code changes I mentioned, as we're making these changes today to bring us in line with the state, we have some zoning code amendments that you'll be seeing if you adopt the resolution today to initiate the zoning code amendment, changing marijuana to cannabis as we are today in the county code, and then also making some changes to commercial applications of cannabis that would be consistent with state regulations.
Thank you. Does that include your report?
I'm done.
Okay. So you'll recall that when this board had a rich discussion not too long ago, a few years ago, about, and this is pre-Prop 64, about whether or not we wanted to have a policy in place for the unincorporated county that would permit limited indoor grows. It was entirely, correct me if I'm wrong, under the auspices of for medical purposes, right? So it was an expression of compassion, I think, mostly by this board that should be permissible. So Prop 64 is passed that legalizes recreational use of marijuana statewide, of course, with all kinds of limitations and restrictions. But does this, in trying to make consistent our regulatory environment around cannabis here in Sacramento County, with the state of California, are we going to now have a de facto permissibility of anyone of legal age to grow 6 plants in their homes, regardless of whether they're a medical card holder or not?
Yes, state law says we have to allow that.
Okay, so this action
medical
could result in a lot more cannabis indoor grows.
Per the will of the voters, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any speakers?
Next speaker?
Any additional questions?
Nope.
We're done. Okay.
We're good. Is there another speaker on the subject?
No,
Oh, okay. I just see all these uniforms. I figured something was going to.
they're here for support.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make the morning long here, but maybe there's someone from the sheriff's office who can come to the podium. I have a question.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board of Supervisors. Jim Barnes with the Sheriff's Office. Currently the commander at the branch jail, but I was formerly the commander in Central Division.
Morning, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, sir.
So given what I just said about kind of the peripheral result or consequence of what we're being asked to do today, which could mean that there could be many more, relatively small indoor grows, 6 plants maximum. Is there anything in the world of drug enforcement for our sheriff's department that you're pivoting on, shifting, expecting that there are just naturally going to be more folks out there that are growing and consuming cannabis in their private residences?
Great question. Actually, our focus on an enforcement standpoint would be obviously the indoor grows that consumes the entire home of marijuana and cannabis grow. The people that are within the law, the 6 plants, that's not someone that we're interested in. Obviously, that's the right regarding state law. However, when the people are growing more than 100 plants, 200 plants, and sometimes up to 1,000 plants, as Jared alluded to, that creates so many different issues, not only from a criminal standpoint, environmental standpoint, but it should be noted, as it was explained to me, is if there's more power going to a grid because of all these homes that are using excess energy, the people who live within that grid, your constituents, their rates will go up because there's more power going to that grid. So there's more than just the enforcement side. We would like to eradicate, as far as the indoor grows, we talked about some of the administrative fees, what they'd go to as far as an educational standpoint. And that's what we do. The POP team also in a compliance standpoint, they'll go in, they'll issue warnings, and hopefully they're able to do it. But even with the indoor grows presents some environmental issues from the grows, the spores that come from that when people move on. So it's important that they comply with the yearly mandate and registration.
So it sounds like it's a real kind of order of magnitude threshold that you're being careful to understand when you enforce.
That is correct. Right now with our professional partners, we look at, obviously with probation, our tips we get from anonymous citizens. Also with working with SMUD, people who are using excess energy, that obviously that would support the information we have already learned through our investigation, would be the people that we would look at, hopefully to eradicate those extensive indoor grows.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Captain Barnes, I just want you to know my coffee stayed warm all the way to work this morning.
Thank you. And if I may just take a second, Sergeant Wetzel's in the office or in the audience. He's retiring at the end of this month, our POP sergeant, after 28 years. His leadership on the POP team and everything we've done, we wouldn't be able to do this without him. So thank you for allowing me to take that time. But thank you, Sergeant Wetzel, for your leadership.
Thank you.
So.
I will say from a South Sacramento perspective that we are going to miss you when you retire, sir. Any other questions? I have a comment. Supervisor Peters, okay, I see you. Actually, somewhat facetiously talked about property and so forth. So I actually, a couple of years ago, went out with Captain Barnes and spent the day with him, and we went with the task force to go out and visit some of these grows in South Sacramento, and I mean it's astonishing. I mean it's wall to wall, 2,000 square foot homes are being destroyed. Neighborhoods are. So I would like to look at, and this is a little outside the box, but I would like County Council to come back with some kind of an opinion on what the county's options are as far as property seizure in these cases. Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say I'm glad for the team to bring it forward so we have consistency with jurisdictions and the state law, and I will move the item.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote with those members present. For item 34, I need a motion to continue to April 9th at 2:45. This is the request to approve the update of the 2018 Sacramento County Transportation Development Fee Program, Nexus Analysis and Fees, approving the Memorandum of Understanding between Regional Transit and the county. Also, it would be introducing a ordinance amending the Sacramento County Code of 16.87.
Why are we continuing it?
There's some issues that Supervisor Natoli had that needed to be ironed out, and I didn't think that it would be a good idea to do it at the dais.
I'll move to continue to April 9th.
Second, yes. Please vote.
Unanimous vote with those members present.
So.
Well,
now what?
Don, we waited as long as we could.
We have nominations if you want to do that, and then.
Well, that'll take about a second.
Trying. And we can either do our presentation, do nominations, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Well, I mean, we may as well do the nominations right now.
So for the nominations, I just want to point out that Supervisor Natoli has a few items, so we may need, once he gets in, we may want to bring it back up. Okay, for your nominations today, you're continuing to April 9th, the Cordova Community Planning Advisory Council, the Local Child Care Planning and Development Council, and for your matters today, first one is Carmichael Old Foothill Farms Community Planning Advisory Council. Supervisor Peters.
I'd like to nominate Nathan Brandon.
Okay. Elk Grove Consumnes Cemetery District, that's Mr. Natoli's, will wait. Equal Employment Opportunity Advisory Committee, Mr. Kennedy.
Chiefs nominate Christy Lack and reappoint Amar Shergill and continue the remainder until April 9th.
Fair Oaks Community Planning Advisory Council, Supervisor Peters.
I'd like to nominate a reappointment of Becky Wood and Leon Corcos and continue the remainder to April 9th.
Supervisor Frost.
I'd like to nominate Chad Bowman.
Okay. Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Advisory Board, Supervisor Kennedy.
Chiefs nominate Jessica Porton and reappoint Robin Blanks Guster and continue the remainder until March 19th.
Perfect. Orangeville Community Planning Advisory Council, Supervisor Frost.
Please continue to March 19th.
Okay. And Sacramento County Mental Health Board, Supervisor Peters.
Nominate Dan Nickum to the District 3 Public Interest Representative.
Okay. And that concludes your nominations.
Thank you.
Back to the beginning.
We got to go.
All right.
Item 30.
Okay. Item 30 is the Garden Highway and American River Parkway camping and debris removal update.
As we're getting started with this item, I'd like to ask County Council just to frame the discussion, because this isn't a free-for-all homeless discussion. If you could narrowly tailor what this discussion is actually about, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Supervisor Kennedy. When this item was agendized, it was through Supervisor Cerna at the last Board of Supervisors meeting on the February 26th, and it was in comments of the board and asking specifically for a report back from the County Executive's Office regarding the homelessness, the garbage debris pickup, specifically on Garden Highway between I-5 and Northgate. And so that is the item that was agendized and what has been prepared for a report back. So the narrow discussion should be within those confines.
Thank you. Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. If we're going to have a narrow discussion here, we made a promise to the public we'd have a report back on the overall condition of the parkway and unincorporated area trash. And so when is that report coming back?
We are planning on bringing that late spring, early summer.
That's too long. I mean, spring, yes, summer, no.
Understood.
I mean, because as we're going to see on the Garden Highway, the trash is, really terrible, but it's also really terrible in other places. So, trash equality.
Supervisor Cerna.
I just want to be clear, this is a little different, a little awkward to have this kind of hovering preface by the county council on narrowness of discussion. The agenda item is the agenda item. So this board member intends to freely discuss, bring up questions about homelessness as it relates to the issue, and whether that's interpreted as being broader than Garden Highway, so be it. But this is the first time in 8 years where there's been kind of this set of blinders put on a discussion by legal counsel. So I just want to say that at the outset.
And Supervisor Cerna, we do have, Ann Edwards has a piece of this talk about homelessness too. So
Okay.
we do have that piece.
Thank you.
But of course, if it were going to be a broad discussion, we'd have a lot more people in the audience. They would have known about this item, and I
Yeah,
think
but in
they're
the
going to
course
be
of-
just as interested. I'm not complaining about it. I just want to point out there's a portion of the community that's missing because this item wasn't brought to their attention.
But it's just very odd to have that kind of preface when we know that homelessness is probably the most complex subject we deal with on a daily basis. It's got a lot of nuance to it. It's more than just tents on Garden Highway.
As you said, it's agendized as it's agendized. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Liz Bellis, Director of Regional Parks. I wanted to start this PowerPoint discussion with just an overview of the area for people like myself who are visual. This is the American River Parkway Boundary Discovery Park Area Plan Map. So Garden Highway area, if I can work this, is right from here.
The pointer doesn't work on these
It's working
screens.
a little,
It's working.
kind of, yeah.
I don't see it.
On
We
this
can.
side. Can you see it? Okay.
I
No.
didn't see it.
Okay.
It won't show up on the screen.
We know where Garden Highway is.
Okay. So that is the American River Parkway Discovery Park Area Plan map, as I stated. Wanted to show the boundaries, especially of Steelhead Creek, that go up to West El Camino. In addition, the city of Sacramento has the Garden Highway Bikeway, which is outlined on the map here. That is the levee top and the multi-use trail that they have there, where there are several tents and homeless folks camping at this moment because of the high waters in the abandoned slough.
Supervisor Serna.
Can I just interject here?
Yes.
Liz, it looks like your eastern boundary there is the Garden Highway entrance to Discovery Park, right?
Correct. That is how the city defines their Garden Highway Bikeway.
Okay, but I think based on your comment about where the impacts are, it's much
broader than that. I just wanted to show the city park side that they had designated.
Okay, thank you.
Which plays into this next slide that kind of goes through who does what in the different areas. The Garden Highway Bikeway, which is the levee top and the multi-purpose trail, as I spoke to, from Gateway Oaks to the Garden Highway entrance to Discovery Park. That is a City of Sacramento facility with law enforcement provided by the City of Sacramento. Debris removal is also provided by the City of Sacramento. If you have driven by there recently, you will see that there are some bagged garbages along that trail. I've been speaking on a regular basis with the interim director of the City of Sacramento Parks Department, and she is directing her staff to go by there on a weekly basis to pick up that bagged trash.
Supervisor Serna.
Thank you. So I want to understand kind of where the delineation is geographically for responsibility for trash removal, debris removal. Top of levee is city's responsibility. Moving down to the toe of the levee and further south, when does it become the county's responsibility?
There's a mixed use of landowners there. Some of it is RD 1000, some of it is City of Sacramento, and then as you get into the slough and then obviously Discovery Park, it is County of Sacramento. The area that is specifically under I-5 is owned by the state of California Caltrans.
So fair to say that anything south of the mean high water line for Steelhead Creek, is that where it becomes county separate from RD 1000?
Correct, although we are definitely working together as agencies to address the problem.
Okay, great, thank you.
Bannon Island Discovery Park, Northgate Boulevard to West El Camino, which was referenced in the first map that I showed you, that is part of the American River Parkway. So law enforcement is the park rangers in coordination with the City of Sacramento. Debris removal is county regional parks. I was only able to get a couple of recent pictures of work that we were doing. As the waters have been receding, our staff have been trying to get to the garbage that has been left behind. This is from yesterday, where they're using our bobcats. And you probably can't see the timestamp, but I just wanted to help illustrate the fact that the equipment that we did recently get from some of our grant applications have been very useful in addressing the debris removal and allowing us to be very efficient.
Where are these photos taken?
This was taken near Steelhead Creek, according to staff, up above the water line. Additionally, my staff met with Clean Oceans, Rivers, and Lakes yesterday, and I am very happy to announce that they are going to have a workday scheduled this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., specifically in the Discovery Park area. They are an environmental conservation organization. They will be utilizing kayaks to get into the waterway to remove some of the trash and debris that has been collected in that waterway, and the regional parks will be providing dumpsters for its removal. We are also exploring working with Aquatic Harvesting Incorporated. It's a company that we have employed in the past to remove aquatic weeds from Mather Lake. But there are some ways that we might be able to use their equipment to actually kind of gather up the garbage that's on the waterways itself and then get it out of the water. So we're exploring that option right now. I'm in preparation for the high flows because we knew they were coming. We knew that the storms were coming. We worked very hard to address the low-lying areas, picking up trash and debris in the areas that are prone to flooding: Steelhead Creek, Northgate Loop, Wood Lake, Bannon Island, and the start of the Two Rivers Trail. In January of 2019, we removed 169 tons of trash and debris, and 147 tons of that trash and debris were from those low-lying areas. These are some pictures for you showing the areas before and after the cleanup. The pictures to the right on this slide is basically we staged the trash underneath I-5 and then use our equipment to load it into the dumpsters.
Can I ask a question, if you could pause right there? So you're showing us before and after. Do you ever go back a week later and see how long it lasts that the trash, after the trash has been removed? Is it fully impacted again in a week or 10 days or a month?
It depends on the area, but yes, people do move back in. The trash does accumulate once again. We are doing our best to really look at the pictures and kind of provide that evidence so that folks know that we are doing our job as far as cleaning up the trash and debris, and then having to go, unfortunately, to those same areas once again. But no, staff aren't going back per se to take a picture again because we are continuing to respond.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
The time lapse would be, photography would be interesting on that, I think.
I agree, it would be. The purpose of this slide is to show the systems of creeks and drainage facilities that flow into the American and Sacramento rivers. Obviously, the trash that accumulates along Steelhead Creek, that accumulates from Dry Creek, Chicken Ranch Slough, Strong Ranch Slough, all of it ends up in the Bannon Slough area, Discovery Park area, before it goes out to ultimately Sacramento River and the Delta. And so I just wanted to show that sometimes it's an accumulation of trash from many other different drainage systems and not just those particular ones that we're addressing today. Multiple jurisdictions, as I spoke to earlier, are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the drainage system. Obviously, creek and channel maintenance is performed in compliance with permits that are issued by the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. The county, Sacramento City, American Flood Control District, and Reclamation District 1000 are meeting regularly with the Central Valley Flood Water Board to discuss trash and debris removal from the waterways. We recognize that this is a serious concern. In addition to all the efforts that our staff undertook in the Steelhead Creek, Bannon Slough area, there was a large-scale collaborative effort to remove trash and debris of the areas of Steelhead Creek above our American River Parkway boundary, so above West El Camino. This was undertaken in December of 2018 by Sacramento City Flood Control District and the flood control districts. It was coordinated by the Central Valley Water Board. Our next meeting to discuss this matter is scheduled for March 26th. With that is the end of the information that I have. I was going to turn it over to Ann Edwards, Director of Human Assistance, unless there are further questions for me.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz, for the presentation. What wasn't mentioned, and I don't know if you have any updates to share relative to this aspect of the condition of the lower reach that's in question here, is what is the State Water Quality Control Board currently doing to further understand water contaminants, whether it be biological, chemical. We all, I think, are very familiar with the fact that I guess it was about two years ago they began to focus in on E. coli and not just the amount of debris that is in the water or adjacent to the water, but pathogens that are in the water. What's the latest there?
Those efforts are ongoing, and in fact, I will be attending a meeting this Friday where I will receive an update on the project they're undertaking to actually test those contaminants to see if they can find port of origin for the E. coli.
Has that kind of been the general challenge for them so far, is to be able to state, with a high degree of certainty that whatever's in the water is a function of, human presence in the parkway or adjacent to the water versus animal? Is that still in question?
Correct. They want to be able to answer that question.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me, Supervisor, I just also wanted to mention that our Environmental Management Department, as well as Dr. Casseri, will both be involved in those discussions as well on that question.
Yes, thank you. I neglected to mention that.
Thank you.
Ann?
Good morning, Chair Kennedy and board members. Ann Edwards, Department of Human Assistance. I don't have any slides, but I just want to give you a brief summary of the outreach efforts that our social workers have made in the area. We have a small but mighty social work team that has been out there several times during the last several weeks, multiple times. The most recent visit was yesterday. They were out there twice yesterday, once for a regular visit and once to follow up on a gentleman that you referred to us. So they've been out there regularly. They plan on going twice a week in the coming weeks until the situation resolves itself. Their goal when they go out there is to really educate the folks on what services are available for them. They ask the campers a variety of questions: how long they've been homeless, do they have a disability, do they have any income, are they willing to work? And one of the most important questions we have found is there someone out here that you're worried about? Because as you know, in our programs, we are really targeting the most vulnerable in the FSRP program as well as the scattered site shelter. And as a result of that question, we did find a gentleman who had not made it up to the road because of his disabilities. He was very frail, and we were able, with the help of park rangers, to get him out and get him safely sheltered. So there's about 18 to 25 people are generally there when we visit, although there's about 25 tents typically when we go out there. And they provide information on all of our services. We don't have, unfortunately, a lot to offer, but we talk to them about motel vouchers, about winter sanctuary, about scattered site sheltering, about Mather Community Campus. And for those that are interested in employment, we are making referrals as appropriate. And we have sheltered a few people, not a great number of people, but we have sheltered a few people. One of the good things about the routine visits is working with people who have been homeless for a long time. The process of engagement with them is really important, and they're becoming familiar faces out there now, and so people are trusting them more. Now, some people know who they are and don't want to talk to them anymore, but other folks are engaging with them and saying, well, yeah, maybe I would be interested in services. So again, that's a brief summary of our activities, and we will continue to go out there twice a week. On Mondays and Wednesdays are the days that we'll be going out in the coming weeks.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thanks. So yeah, I was out there myself yesterday, spent, probably an hour taking photographs, I spoke with two gentlemen, homeless individuals. They were composed and articulate and able to explain the circumstance around their condition and why they're out there, and they were very candid, and it was a good conversation, and they expressed empathy for the surrounding community in terms of the collection of debris and the mess itself. One tent, in fact, had 2 different generators running at the time I was there. Number of animals, dogs,
yep,
were present. They all behaved themselves, thank God. But it was, it's a mess. It's a real mess. And I assume that, Ann, when our social workers are going out there, and in fact, one gentleman actually knew Megan by first name, that was good to hear. When they go out currently, it's under the auspice, I assume, that of the Boise decision, so that, in other words, they are restricted, working in conjunction with the rangers, from telling them they have to move or otherwise citing them for their presence. My understanding is they can certainly be cited for all the other infractions that they may be committing, whether it be, essentially illegal dumping, having in carts in the parkway, having off-leash animals, incendiary devices, chemicals, what have you. But my understanding is that the message, whether it be delivered by our social workers or the rangers at the current time, is they cannot tell them to leave because of the Boise decision. Is that still the case?
Well, I don't want to speak for the park ranger messaging, but prior to Boise and post Boise, we never saw the role of the social workers to tell them to leave.
Okay.
The role of the social workers is really to engage them and let them know the kinds of services that are available. We also offer them information about Medi-Cal and CalFresh and general assistance, but we've never seen our role as telling them they have to leave. I do believe that's probably what the park rangers are saying, because they can speak to that themselves.
I see our head park ranger is here. Maybe he can speak to this.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you. Currently, under our current guidelines, we are not advising or ordering people to leave the parkway.
Specifically because of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal decision, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess what I want to stress here is that it's one thing for the County of Sacramento to abide by that decision and appropriately change our deployments and protocols. And I know we've done that, and I think there's been a lot of thought applied to how we do that. At the same time, consistently expressing compassion in how we do it, and having our social workers working in conjunction with our rangers to address the simultaneous challenge of, how do we depopulate the parkway at the same time and simultaneously provide compassionate help for people that need it the most. So that's the county. But there's another actor out there, and that is the federal government. So we have the Army Corps of Engineers that we all know are staging as we speak to do some significant work along that stretch of the levee system. They're going to be putting in a deep slurry wall. They're going to be adjusting the toes of levees. They're going to have a lot of heavy, dangerous equipment in there in the not too distant future as soon as the weather begins to change. And it will then, I assume, become the federal government's charge to, at least in part, work with us to make sure that people are not going to be in harm's way. And so the point of me stressing this is that it's one thing when there's not this looming construction project that for public safety purposes will require people to vacate, but it's going to be something quite different here in a few months. And what is our plan, and maybe the CEO can speak to this as well, but what is our plan when that happens? Because those folks will then have to go somewhere. And where do we expect that they're going to go? Are they going to disperse on their own? Is it going to be treated ad hoc? Are we developing a plan to perhaps even work with the city, since if they're occupying the tops of the levees, and we were just told that top of levee, the crown of levee, is really kind of city jurisdiction. How are we working with the city, who is currently attempting to find these, I guess would be 7 100-bed facilities in each council district? So I know it's a lot of moving parts, and that's why I didn't want a restriction on this discussion, because there are so many moving parts. But what are we doing to plan appropriately for when that construction actually begins? I don't know who wants to take the question.
I think Liz has been Liz.
As you stated, we will be shutting down that area due to public safety. And we have started the dialogue. We had a conversation with Ann Edwards about this very issue, knowing that construction will be occurring shortly and how we would be addressing it. So we are looking at that issue, yes.
And of course, city's going to be involved in that discussion, and same protocols that we have at this point.
Okay.
And when we have displacement out of the parkway, impacts it has on the neighborhoods in the city, social services, what is the services that the city has, what can we provide? But that is something that Liz is spearheading that for us.
Okay, as you can imagine, the buck stops here, not there. And so I receive, and it's, I know what I signed up for. I receive, at least a dozen emails a day from my constituents in the immediate adjacent neighborhood of South Natomas and Gardenland, Northgate. And I think they're rightfully concerned about what they see out their rear windows or as they pull out of their driveways every day. And some would like to be able to use that part of the parkway, and they don't feel like they can. And so while I have this equal obligation to certainly address their concerns compared to my other obligation to help my constituents who are suffering homelessness, I think it's incumbent upon us as a team, not just my office, but DHA, Parks, maybe Public Works, since it is going to be a Public Works project, although constructed by the federal government, to, when we come up with that plan, to make sure that we're communicating in real time with the neighborhood about what the plan is, what their expectations should be, how we're trying to minimize impacts to them, and not wait till it's in motion, it's going on, and then the supervisor's office just, gets the emails, and we have to have another update just like this one in August. So, so the point being is, I think the communication is critical with the constituency out there to make sure that they understand what we're doing, how we're partnering to make sure that we're going to keep impacts to a minimum.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? We do have some public comment. Betsy Weiland.
Something will blow up. Okay, thank you, supervisors, for this time this morning. Greatly appreciated. My name is Betsy Weiland, and I'm here today representing the American River Parkway Coalition. Thank you, Supervisor Peters, for bringing up the broader meeting that was promised to the public October 15th. As a result of the Boise decision, you came together and had a discussion at that time, and then you directed your staff and county council and parks to come back in December with another public meeting to give us all an idea of what can be done, given the Boise decision, proactively to not slide backwards from all the progress we had been making. So, yeah, June does seem kind of late. Given the stress we're all under because of that decision. So I will say this from the American River Parkway Coalition, that your park rangers have definitely not been sitting back on their heels. I wish you had time today to hear from our chief ranger about everything they've been doing creatively to make use of every tool that they have legally to keep things as best under control as they can. So we greatly appreciate our park rangers and what they have to do with the limited ability that they have to do it with. So the other thing I wanted to ask was, where is Union Pacific in all of this too? We were out doing a canvassing of the parkway a couple weekends ago, and there is an issue along the railroad tracks too, especially down around ERI and Cal Expo, where you will actually see encampments along the railroad tracks. And I know Kathy can speak to other areas that are under UP's jurisdiction that create quite a mess and quite a lot of problems. So I think they need to be part of the conversation also.
Can you start wrapping up?
Oh, yeah, I can. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Let's see. Why don't I just leave it at that then? And that kind of covered my two main points.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Stephen Green.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'd like to second what Betsy said about the park rangers. We have great respect for the work they do and the risks they take. We really do. We have a new concern at Bushy Lake. For 5 years, Sacramento State University has had an academic program there in habitat restoration. Recently, homeless people have moved in and are camping there. They have pit bulls. The students and faculty have been cleaning up trash, and they've encountered human feces and needles. And the homeless people are destroying the habitat that they've already put in place there, and also the pollinating plants. Something has to be done immediately to stop the camping that is destroying this academic program. Thank you.
Thank you. Roland Brady.
Thank you so much, Supervisors. I'm Roland Brady. I'm an emeritus professor of geology, and I represent the Sacramento Area Creeks Council. And you're all aware of the issue of not only the hazardous waste, but the solid waste that's being deposited in the parkway that's a pernicious assault on the natural resources that the parkway was established to protect. In addition to the waste that you see, I've been undertaking a study of the waste that's in the channel of Steelhead Creek in the area under discussion here. And in 13 different sites, I've measured out a 300 square foot area, which is just about the size of this region here, and then quantitatively assessing the types of debris, the weights of debris, and the volume of debris. And what we've been concluding is that between 80 and 95% of the channel bottom is armored by debris. And the significance of this is it prevents burrowing organisms from accessing the bottom of the channel, and most of these organisms are the food for the base of the food chain. And keep in mind that Steelhead Creek is the site of listed steelhead species and also Chinook salmon. They're federally listed. And this armor on the bottom creates an anoxic death zone underneath it. So there is no free oxygen. So the organisms cannot survive underneath this. And to give you an example, in one particular site, we removed 1,328 pounds of debris, 111 cubic feet, and 97% of the channel bottom was armored with this debris. So the damage is not a matter of aesthetics, and it's not just the human waste, but there is a real impact on the natural environment that you don't see that's below the channel. So I am in the process of applying for a DWR urban stream restoration grant, and I would certainly like to discuss that with you all and encourage you to explore ways of setting aside the riparian corridor of Steelhead Creek separate from the constraints of the Boise decision, because that's going to have to be done in order to restore this channel. Thank you.
Thank you. I let you go over because that was fascinating. I appreciate that. Randy Smith.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Randy Smith. I grew up living along Arcade Creek as a child and just wanted to protect the creeks. Arcade Creek flows down into Steelhead Creek. So through the years, I've gone down to Steelhead Creek, exploring the creek. And in the past year especially, I've been helping with trying to remove a lot of the garbage that's there. And appalled at how much has been, I've been visiting the camps, the areas that have been affected by the camps there quite a bit. What I wanted to share is up on Arcade Creek and within the city of Sacramento and Del Paso Regional Park, there are signs that were installed to protect the natural habitat area in 2017. And along Arcade Creek, it's a designated natural habitat area, and they have been very effective along working with the city park rangers in keeping the effect of the human activities from being as harmful on those creeks up there. And I was wondering if this would, well, let me back up. In looking at the presentation, the PowerPoint you just saw at the beginning of this agenda item, I see that there are protected areas in the garden, along the Garden Highway in Del Paso and Discovery Park along Steelhead Creek. And if there could be areas protected, prohibiting anyone from going into along an area of the creek within 250 feet or so on either side of the creek to protect the waterways and the effect of the human effects that have been degrading the lower part of the channel along the waterways. Time's up. There's so much more I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank everybody for not only being here today and for your passion, and obviously, this is an important issue, but also thank you for your indulgence in helping us move the schedule around. I appreciate that. Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. So first let me say as well, I appreciate the speaker's patience to hear the item. Of course, it's not an action item. And in fact, it wasn't originally designed to necessarily be a timed item, but I'm glad it was in retrospect, because it gives people an opportunity in the district that I represent to be here and express their concerns, as they rightfully should. I share every bit, if not more, the concerns that have been expressed today in person by our speakers. I share the same concerns that I receive every day, as I mentioned earlier, from the broad community near the Garden Highway. I think it's a travesty what's happening to the lower reach, not just the Garden Highway portion, but that portion, especially from the H Street Bridge down to the confluence. It's a very, very different parkway. And as someone that's grown up here, that enjoys all kinds of recreational amenity associated with the parkway in his youth and would like to do so, and as he grows old, it really is a shame that, like so many of my constituents, I don't necessarily feel safe. I don't necessarily appreciate the deteriorating aesthetic of the lower reach. And for me, it's continues to be very frustrating, but I think the ongoing saga should be pretty clear to most, as it relates to my involvement, that it remains a high priority for the supervisor. I take it very seriously, doing what I can in my own right to communicate very clearly in different forms with my constituency out there. I think, as was mentioned rightfully so by Ms. Whelan and by Mr. Green, our park rangers are doing everything they can. And remember, just a few years ago, we had a spirited debate in these chambers and discussion, and ultimately a vote, to almost double the regional parks budget. And that was started at my behest, because I was continuing to see the deterioration of the lower reach. I think we carefully thought about how we are going to use those additional resources to redeploy more staff, more days of the week, to address the ongoing challenges, especially in the lower reach, and that's ongoing. I think the CEO has wisely adjusted, given the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision on Boise, to not just kind of immediately reappropriate resources away from the parkway. We've kept them in the parkway, but we've had to adjust. We've focused more on those things that we can enforce that aren't subject to the Boise decision, whether it be additional means of trash and debris removal, whether it be making sure that those that choose to recreate, that have the right to recreate in the parkway, are not unsafe when it comes to off-leash animals. Especially during the summer months, we're making sure that any fire hazards are kept to a minimum. And so the public should know that that continues to be a focus of the county. But needless to say, after all is said and done, we look at the impacts, and the impacts are not going in the direction that we want. They're getting worse. And they're especially exacerbated during this time of year when the water comes up, and it's really much more pronounced to see the top of levees occupied with, Ann said 25 tents. When I was out there yesterday, I counted more than 50, but that probably changes day to day. And that is not the parkway we all want. And so I think, the best that we can do is certainly continue to be creative in how we address the impacts. I think we have to be creative in terms of how we continue to simultaneously focus on providing shelter and wraparound services for those that feel that their only option is to camp in the parkway. Those two go hand in hand. They will always go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. You can't address one without the other. And I'm all ears too. I have no pride of authorship or ownership in terms of how we address this. If there's some new idea that my constituents have or our executive team has about how to better address this, I want to hear it. So I'm glad that we had this update. I think it's a good reminder. I think it's a shame Mr. Tolley wasn't able to be here because he has taken the time, even though it's not his district, to go out to the Garden Highway at my encouraging to see for himself what my constituents see and what I see every day. And I know that if he were here, he'd probably be very passionate about the fact that we do need to stay very much on top of this. And so I don't know if the CEO has any comments he wants to add to this. I want to thank the Rangers. I want to thank Liz and all her team with DHA for continuing to do what they do. But it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways. We have to do better. We have to find a way to do better. That falls on my shoulders as much as anyone's.
I think it was all stated, and the main thing is as we start working with RD 1000 and the Army Corps of Engineers communication plan, we'll make sure we get the message out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you again for being here. Madam Clerk.
We have the county executive comments.
No comments.
And now it's the board's comments.
Any comments?
Yeah, did have one comment. I just wanted to follow up from the last board hearing we had in terms of the comments. I made mention of the fact that I was then going to Washington, D.C. to advocate for a NACO resolution that this is the National Association of Counties that would adopt as a formal priority area focusing on disparate African American childhood deaths, similar to the way that this county has done for several years now, with hopefully the same success in achieving the outcomes we all want. And that was passed unanimously by the NACO Health Steering Committee, and then later by unanimously by the full NACO Board of Directors. And this has now become part of the official platform for our National Association. My understanding is up until and through the balance of this legislative cycle, and there's every intent to continue to make it a permanent part of the NACO platform with a similar effort that will commence this summer. So that is something that I think all of us on this board, and certainly everyone in our county family, especially those in CPS and DHA and other agencies that have been such an integral part, First Five, can be very, very proud of. And thank you, Bruce, for all your help.
Great, thank you. Anything else? All right, we do have a closed session item, and there'll be nothing to report out, so we'll adjourn.